When humanity first made contact with the stars, the world stood still. For the first time, the skies that had always felt so far away suddenly answered back. People everywhere, scientists, children, dreamers, believed they were witnessing the beginning of a new chapter in human history. It was the day Earth was invited to join the Galactic Council, a grand alliance of advanced civilizations that claimed to live by peace, equality, and shared progress. The invitation came wrapped in promises. The Council spoke of friendship, open trade, and the exchange of knowledge. They said humanity would stand as an equal among the stars. No more war, no more isolation, only cooperation and hope. Across Earth, cities celebrated. In crowded streets and glowing screens, people cheered the idea that the future had finally arrived. The ceremony of joining the Council was broadcast to billions. The image of Earth's representative shaking hands, or whatever the alien equivalent was, became one of the most replayed moments in human history. It looked perfect. It felt like unity. The Council delegates spoke of trust, peace, and a shared destiny. For once, even old rivals on Earth found themselves agreeing. Maybe this time, humanity had done something right. In those early days, everything seemed bright. Trade routes opened, new technologies flowed in, and the first alien visitors walked among humans without fear. There were concerts celebrating interstellar friendship, new schools teaching alien languages, and documentaries showing how Earth had finally found its place among the stars. But underneath the joy, a few quiet voices raised questions. Why were so many council laws written in ways no human could fully understand? Why did every trade agreement have hidden security clauses? Why were Earth's defense projects being reviewed by off-world inspectors? These questions were small at first, and most people ignored them. After all, peace had finally come. Who wanted to ruin that with suspicion? Still, the signs were there. When Earth scientists tried to access advanced energy systems, they were told those were restricted technologies. When human diplomats requested to lead certain joint projects, the answer was always polite but firm. The Council will oversee this matter. It was said with smiles and calm voices, but it meant something deeper. Humanity was welcome, but not trusted. The years that followed turned the bright promise into something more complicated. The Council's influence grew stronger, slowly but steadily. Earth's industries began to depend on alien supplies. Its defense systems required Council approval for upgrades. And each time humans asked why, they were reminded that peace had a price, obedience. Most people didn't notice. Life was good after all. There were jobs, technology, and no wars. But for those who paid attention, it became clear that the promise of equality was slowly turning into quiet control. And somewhere, buried deep inside the Council's charter, in fine print no one had bothered to read, were the first cracks in the dream of unity. The promise had been made, but the power had already shifted. The age of hope was beginning to turn into something else entirely. The early years of Earth's membership in the Galactic Council were filled with excitement. New technologies changed daily life. Medicine advanced, clean energy became common, and travel between planets was no longer a dream. Humanity felt proud. The world was finally part of something larger. But behind that happiness, small details began to shift, quiet, almost invisible at first. It started with simple requests. The Council asked for human research data for shared progress. Scientists gladly sent their findings, discoveries in physics, medicine, and energy. In return, they expected to learn from the vast alien archives. But when they asked for access, the answer always came in the same calm, polished tone. Not yet. Humanity is still adapting. At first, people accepted it. The Council was old and wise. Maybe they just wanted to make sure humanity was ready. But the pattern continued. Earth shared everything while receiving almost nothing in return. Some scientists began to whisper that the Council wasn't protecting humanity. It was controlling it. Years passed. The small requests turned into official orders. Earth's industries were told what to produce, which technologies could be developed, and which projects were too sensitive. Every decision was framed as cooperation, but it didn't feel like cooperation anymore. It felt like permission. When a group of researchers questioned these limits, their funding was quietly cut. When journalists tried to report on it, the Council's media department labeled the stories as misinformation. Slowly, truth became something people had to search for in private. The first public protests began in a small city. Ordinary people marched with signs asking for fair access to the Council's archives, the knowledge they were promised when Earth joined. The demonstration was peaceful, full of hope. But the next day, the Council released a statement calling it an internal disturbance. The phrase was cold, distant, and it changed everything. World leaders noticed the tone. They began to realize that the Council didn't see Earth as a partner. It saw Earth as a territory, a young world to be guided, monitored, and restrained. Meetings that once felt like friendly discussions now felt like commands given with a smile. Some leaders still tried to reason. They believed diplomacy could fix things. Others, quieter but sharper, started to prepare for the worst. They understood that the Council's kindness was a mask, polite words hiding control. Meanwhile, ordinary people went on with their lives. They still had jobs, families, and dreams, but something in the air had changed. The hope that once filled the world now carried a strange weight, an unspoken tension. People began to avoid talking about the Council. It was safer not to. The chains weren't made of metal or law. They were made of influence, invisible, quiet, and almost impossible to prove. And yet, they grew tighter every year. Earth had joined the stars to find freedom and unity. But slowly, piece by piece, humanity was learning that even among the stars, control could hide behind gentle words. The age of wonder was beginning to feel like a cage built from promises. It began with hope, the kind that reminded people why they ever reached for the stars in the first place. A group of Earth scientists had done what many thought impossible. They built a clean energy drive that could power ships without fuel forever. It was a discovery that could change the entire galaxy. No more costly trade routes, no more dependence on the Council's energy sources. Anyone, anywhere could travel the stars freely. For humanity, it meant independence. For the Council, it meant trouble. At first, the announcement was met with cautious excitement. News channels called it the dawn of a new era. Crowds gathered outside laboratories, cheering for the team that had made it happen. People dreamed of exploring worlds on their own terms, of no longer waiting for permission. It was a peaceful kind of revolution, born from science, not war. But the Council acted faster than anyone expected. Within days, they sent an order halting all work on the project. Their reason sounded official: security risks. They claimed the technology could destabilize the galaxy's economy and threaten interstellar balance. To most humans, it was clear what that really meant. The Council feared losing control. When the scientists refused to hand over their data, Council enforcers arrived. It was all done quietly, efficiently, but someone recorded it. The footage showed armored officials entering the lab, taking every file, every drive, every piece of equipment. In the middle of it all stood the lead scientist, calm, unshaken, refusing to surrender. She was taken away for questioning, the Council said. But people knew what that meant. Within hours, the video spread everywhere, from Earth's cities to colonies on Mars and the moons beyond. Billions watched in disbelief. They had trusted the Council. They had believed in peace. Now they were seeing what that peace truly cost. News anchors spoke carefully, afraid of saying too much. But the people didn't need words. They saw enough. A brilliant mind, working for humanity's progress, had been silenced. And that silence hit harder than any weapon could. For the first time in decades, old divisions on Earth began to fade. Governments that hadn't agreed on anything in years found themselves united by anger. Leaders who had once spoken softly to the Council now spoke with fire. The message was simple: enough. That night, the skies above Earth glowed with protests, lights, and messages written across city towers. It wasn't chaos, it was awakening. People realized they had given too much trust, too much power, and received too little respect in return. No one declared war, But something more powerful happened. The world stopped obeying. The council might have taken the scientist, but they couldn't take what she started, an idea that lived in every human heart. Freedom should never have a price tag, and that was the moment everything changed. For the first time in a century, Earth spoke with one voice, and it wasn't a voice of fear. It was a voice of anger, pride, and the promise that humanity would never be silent again. After the arrest of the scientist, Earth demanded answers. The protests, the anger, and the silence that followed had shaken the world. People wanted justice. They wanted the council to listen. So, Earth's leaders decided to take the matter through official channels, the Ethics Committee of the Galactic Council. It was meant to be the place where fairness ruled above power. The hearings began with formality and promise. Representatives from across the stars gathered in a grand chamber, floating in orbit above a neutral world. The hall was silent except for the hum of translators and the soft glow of alien symbols on tall walls. Humanity stood there, proud, angry, but still hopeful, believing that truth, once spoken, would matter. Earth's representative spoke with calm strength. He explained how the clean energy drive was not a weapon, but a gift. He reminded them of the Council's founding laws: equality, freedom of progress, and cooperation. His voice carried not just his words, but the faith of billions who still wanted to believe the system could be fair. The council members listened politely. Some nodded, others avoided eye contact. Then came their turn to speak. They praised humanity's ambition, but warned about reckless innovation. They spoke in long, careful sentences that sounded reasonable but hid a single message. Power must stay where it already was. Days turned into weeks. More hearings followed. Promises were repeated, statements were made for the cameras, and then nothing. When the final verdict was read, the hall was quiet enough to hear the electric buzz of the translator drones. Humanity's innovation threatens galactic stability, the council announced. The project will remain under council supervision indefinitely. It was the kind of sentence that ended dreams. There was no shouting, no drama, just silence. Every human representative knew what those words meant. The council had already decided long before the hearing began. The process had only been theater, a performance to make control look like justice. When the decision reached Earth, people stopped whatever they were doing and listened. The same world that had once celebrated joining the council now sat in quiet disbelief. The illusion of equality shattered. The truth was simple and cruel. Humanity had never been seen as an equal. That night, lights in cities dimmed. On public buildings, the blue flag of the council was lowered for the first time since Earth joined. Some people wept, others stood still, staring at the sky with clenched fists. News anchors spoke with heavy voices. No one used the word betrayal on air, but everyone felt it. Children who once looked at the stars with wonder now asked their parents, "Why did they do this to us?" And no one had an answer. The council still called it peace, but everyone could see what kind of peace it truly was, one built on silence, obedience, and fear, and somewhere deep inside every human heart, something changed. Wonder turned to defiance. Hope turned to determination. Humanity finally understood. If they wanted freedom among the stars, they would have to take it back themselves. The years that followed were quiet, too quiet. To the outside world, it looked as if Earth had finally given up. Trade slowed down, embassies closed, and the once busy communication lines between planets went silent. Council representatives called it a period of reflection. They believed humanity had accepted its place. But beneath that silence, something powerful was growing. It began in hidden meetings. Small groups of scientists, engineers, and thinkers gathering in dark rooms and secure channels. They talked not about revenge, but about freedom. They spoke of a future where no one could take away their discoveries, their voices, or their right to exist as equals. For the first time in generations, every nation on Earth started working together, quietly setting aside politics and pride. Old rivalries that once divided humanity began to fade. Countries that had competed for resources were now sharing them. Space agencies that once raced against each other were now partners in secret projects. Humanity had been humiliated, yes, but that humiliation had turned into unity. Factories that once made commercial parts began shifting production to new designs, durable materials, advanced systems, silent engines. Data networks were repurposed into encrypted communication lines. Even art and media carried hidden messages of hope, disguised as entertainment. It was a global whisper of defiance that the Council couldn't hear. While the Council believed Earth had grown quiet out of fear, it was actually the calm before something much larger. Hidden in mountains, deserts, and deep ocean labs, humanity built new systems powered by knowledge they had protected from the Council's reach. The clean energy drive, the invention that had caused so much trouble, was being rebuilt in secret, improved and multiplied. Every scientist who had once worked under Council supervision was now working for a single cause, to ensure humanity could stand on its own. They called it Project Dawn, though few dared to say the name aloud. It wasn't a plan for war, it was a plan for survival. Even the leaders who had once trusted the Council began to change. Their speeches grew shorter, their eyes sharper. They no longer asked for approval. They gave quiet instructions. They knew the next time the Council tried to control Earth, the world would need to be ready. Ordinary people sensed it too. They didn't know the details, but they felt the change in the air, the tension, the focus, the strange unity that made the planet move like one heartbeat. Humanity was done asking for permission. 3 years passed like that. No major news, no open rebellion, just silence. The Council thought Earth had accepted defeat. They didn't see the factories working through the night, the hidden launch sites, the secret research outposts orbiting close to the moon. Earth wasn't surrendering. It was preparing. The plan wasn't to conquer the stars or take revenge. Humanity wanted something simpler, something stronger, and to be free, to be respected, and to never again bow to anyone. And as the 3rd year ended, that quiet determination began to glow brighter than any star the Council had ever controlled. 3 years of silence made the Council uneasy. Earth's withdrawal had gone on longer than anyone expected, and rumors began spreading through the galaxy. Some said humanity had collapsed. Others whispered that Earth was hiding something. The Council, used to control and obedience, decided to act. They called it a peacekeeping mission, but everyone knew what it really was: a show of power. A fleet of warships was sent toward Earth, their arrival announced as a reminder of unity. Every broadcast made it sound calm and diplomatic. But behind those words was a warning: obey or be made to obey. The people of Earth watched the skies grow brighter as the ships approached. No one panicked. No one ran. They had been waiting for this moment. In control centers buried deep beneath the planet's surface, quiet teams prepared. They spoke little, their faces calm. They knew what they were about to do would change history forever. When the Council fleet entered orbit, the world held its breath. From the outside, it looked like an easy task. The same old planet, smaller, weaker, already under Council authority. Commanders aboard the alien vessels expected no resistance. They were wrong. As the first command signals were sent down to Earth, something unexpected happened. The skies shimmered, silver, blue, and bright as dawn. The air itself seemed to hum. And then, one by one, the hidden defense systems that humanity had secretly built over 3 long years came to life. It wasn't an attack. No explosions, no chaos. Just light, controlled, powerful, and silent. The clean energy technology the Council had once tried to destroy now formed a protective network across the planet's orbit. Invisible until that very moment, it unfolded like a shield of shimmering mist. The Council ships stopped immediately. Their scanners failed to understand what they were seeing. The systems that should have read Earth's defenses showed nothing familiar. Energy readings spiked beyond anything the fleet had encountered before. And for the first time, the Council realized humanity had developed something entirely its own. Something they didn't control, didn't design, and couldn't predict. From the surface, people looked up and saw the night sky glowing like a curtain of stars. Children pointed, thinking it was beautiful. Adults stood still, tears in their eyes, knowing what it meant. Earth had found its voice again, not through words or war, but through courage and preparation. The Council fleet didn't fire a single shot. Instead, they backed away. Slowly, carefully. The order came from their command. Stand down. They weren't retreating from destruction. They were retreating from realization. The message was clear. Earth was no longer under their control. Humanity had broken the silence not with violence, but with strength born from unity. Across the galaxy, observers watched in disbelief. For centuries, no one had defied the Council and survived. But Earth hadn't just survived, it had changed the rules. That moment became known as the spark. Not because of fire or war, but because it was the instant when humanity lit a flame that could never again be extinguished, the light of freedom. The day after the Council fleet withdrew, Earth was silent again, but this time it wasn't fear that filled the air. It was something stronger, something deeper. People around the world stood together, waiting. Everyone knew a response would come. Not from the military, not from scientists, but from the heart of humanity itself. Within hours, every screen across the planet lit up. The seal of Earth's United Council appeared, followed by a familiar face, the Chancellor. The leader looked calm, steady, but there was fire in the eyes that everyone could feel, even through a broadcast. The speech that followed would be remembered for centuries. "We do not seek war," the Chancellor began, the voice clear and firm. "But we will no longer bow." The words were simple, but they hit like thunder. All around the world, in crowded cities, quiet farms, space stations, and colonies, people stopped what they were doing and listened. Even children sat silently beside their parents. "You built a system on fear," the Chancellor continued. "We build on trust. You rule with silence. We answer with truth." Those sentences were repeated again and again across every human channel. Translators carried the message into alien languages, and soon it spread far beyond Earth. Across distant worlds, species who had lived under the Council's rules for generations heard humanity's voice. Not begging, not fighting, but standing tall. The Chancellor spoke of freedom, of the right to grow without permission, and of the courage it took to stand up against control disguised as peace. There were no threats in the speech, no hatred, only a clear promise that humanity would never again let fear decide its place among the stars. In the Council's grand chamber, delegates watched the broadcast in uneasy silence. No one had ever spoken to them like that before. For centuries, they had ruled through order and quiet obedience. Every rebellion that rose against them had been crushed or forgotten. But this felt different. Humanity wasn't rebelling for power. It was standing for dignity. Across the galaxy, something began to shift. On distant colonies ruled by the Council, workers paused their tasks and whispered about the broadcast. On worlds where speech was censored, people repeated the Chancellor's words in secret, writing them on walls and data screens. "We do not seek war, but we will no longer bow." Even among the Council's own citizens, questions began to spread. Was the system they lived under truly built on peace or just control? For humanity, the speech was more than just defiance. It was healing. After years of silence, humiliation, and broken promises, the world had found its voice again, and this time, that voice carried far beyond the solar system. When the Chancellor's message ended, the screen went dark. But across Earth and countless worlds beyond, the spark that had been lit the day before now burned brighter. The Council's power didn't crumble overnight, but cracks began to form. For the first time in living memory, truth was louder than fear. And from that day forward, every species that heard Earth's message knew one thing: the age of quiet obedience was ending. Humanity had taken its stand. The Chancellor's broadcast didn't just reach Earth. It traveled across the galaxy, carried by signals, whispers, and hope. On planets and stations under the Council's control, species who had lived quietly under strict rules began to listen. At first it was disbelief. They had been told for generations that questioning the Council was dangerous. Yet the words of one world, Earth, made them pause. It started quietly. Workers on mining colonies refused orders that seemed unfair. Scientists stopped sharing research with council authorities. Small groups gathered in private, speaking about fairness, equality, and freedom. They wondered, if Earth can stand up, why can't we? Then came the first open protest. It happened in a massive station at the edge of known space. Hundreds of species gathered, holding signs, sending messages, and chanting words that no one had dared speak aloud for centuries. The council tried to silence them, but their words fell flat. Humanity had shown that courage didn't need weapons, only conviction. News spread faster than the council could manage. Across other worlds, whispers became statements and statements became marches. Council delegates were shocked. Their centuries of control, built on obedience and fear, were unraveling. One by one, member worlds began questioning old laws, old rules, and old promises. They were inspired by the simple truth that one world's courage could light a galaxy. On Earth, people watched as the ripple of their stand grew into a wave. The phrase, "Earth stood up," appeared everywhere. On digital boards, in songs, on posters, and even in secret messages in alien languages. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that bravery could inspire change far beyond any border. The council reacted with confusion, issuing orders, sending fleets, and trying to remind other worlds of their authority. But it was too late. The belief that the council's control was absolute had been broken. The fear that kept species in line no longer worked. Every attempt to intimidate only strengthened the resolve of those who had begun to speak. On planets that had long suffered in silence, ordinary beings, workers, students, families, began to stand together. They shared stories of injustice, they demanded fairness, and they looked to Earth as proof that standing up could work. Across the galaxy, a quiet revolution was spreading, powered not by weapons, but by hope and unity. Even within the council's own halls, delegates whispered. Many had believed that the organization was untouchable. Now their own colleagues were questioning old orders, old hierarchies, and old loyalties. The system they had relied on for centuries was crumbling because one world refused to be silent. Back on Earth, life continued as usual, but people knew the galaxy was changing. They had started a chain reaction that could not be stopped. Humanity had become a symbol, not through conquest, not through aggression, but through courage and clarity. The spark that had begun with the Chancellor's voice had become a fire. Across the galaxy, voices once hidden began to rise. The Council's long shadow was shrinking, and for the first time in centuries, the stars themselves seemed alive with possibility. And everywhere, one phrase echoed, simple but powerful. Earth stood up. The rebellion that had begun with Earth's courage grew faster than anyone could have imagined. Worlds once loyal to the Council started questioning old rules. Stations that had been quiet for centuries erupted with protests. Entire planets refused to follow orders they had once accepted without question. The Council, which had relied on fear, silence, and strict control, found itself facing a force it could not stop. At first, the leaders tried to respond as they always had, with threats, fleets, and intimidation. They sent envoys demanding obedience. They issued declarations reminding everyone of their laws, but each attempt to regain control failed. The Council underestimated the determination of countless beings who had discovered for the first time that they had a voice. Soon, fractures appeared inside the Council itself. Members who had once stood together for centuries began withdrawing. Some left quietly, claiming they disagreed with the methods of leadership. Others openly rejected the system, siding with those who sought fairness and equality. Half of the Council's representatives abandoned their posts, taking their influence, resources, and fleets with them. The remaining core worlds tried to maintain order, but their unity had vanished. Distrust and fear spread among them. Alliances broke, former friends turned on each other, and the command structures that had once enforced obedience collapsed. Where there had been centuries of careful planning, now there was chaos. From Earth's perspective, the change was extraordinary, but not celebrated with fanfare. No parades, no fireworks, no speeches about victory. Humanity had not sought revenge. Its goal had never been conquest or glory. It had simply wanted freedom, and that freedom came with quiet responsibility. Cities on Earth slowly returned to life, now free from the Council's influence. Factories restarted, research centers reopened, and communities rebuilt. People shared stories of hope and resilience, but they also carried a heavy understanding. Freedom is never free. It requires patience, courage, and the willingness to face uncertainty. Every resource, every life, every choice had a cost. Even as the galaxy shifted, humans kept their focus on balance. They reached out to other worlds that had suffered under the Council, offering support and guidance. It was a delicate task, helping others find freedom without dominating them, ensuring the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Across space, former Council worlds slowly reconnected. Some sought peace, others still grappled with fear and suspicion. But the power dynamic had changed forever. No longer could one system dictate the lives of billions of beings. Humanity had shown that unity, courage, and truth could challenge even the oldest institutions. And on Earth, life continued quietly. People worked, learned, and dreamed among the stars. The Council was gone, but the lessons remained. Freedom always has a price. It is earned, maintained, and defended not by force alone, but by the strength of conviction, the unity of purpose, and the courage to stand when it matters most. The galaxy was quieter now, but it had changed. Humanity had faced the impossible and survived. The collapse of an empire had left a space for hope, fragile, yes, but real. And for the first time in centuries, the stars felt like home, rather than a distant authority to obey. Years passed after the Council's collapse, and the galaxy slowly began to breathe again. Worlds that had lived under strict control learned to govern themselves. Earth, which had sparked the change, became a quiet symbol of courage, patience, and unity. No grand monuments were built. No victory parades were held. Humanity didn't need them. The lesson had already been written in the stars. Across distant planets, alien academies taught the story of the Earth Rebellion. Students listened in classrooms that floated above cities, in auditoriums that stretched across mountains, and in quiet libraries tucked into hidden corners of their worlds. They learned how one planet, small and young compared to the Council, had reminded the galaxy that power built on fear cannot last. The lesson was simple but powerful. Justice cannot be forced, and trust cannot be demanded. It must be earned. The story often focused on Dr. Amira Solon, the scientist who had refused to surrender her research when the Council tried to take it. Her courage had sparked the beginning of Earth's stand. In quiet memorials across multiple worlds, her name was etched beneath a single, unforgettable quote. When truth is forbidden, silence becomes the loudest weapon. People studied it, whispered it, and carried it forward in their work and their lives. Earth itself began to heal. The cities that had watched fleets enter orbit without firing a shot slowly returned to normal. People worked side by side with neighbors they had never met before, repairing infrastructure, sharing knowledge, and teaching the next generation about the responsibility that comes with freedom. The world had learned that liberty is not a gift. It is a choice, a constant effort, and sometimes a quiet struggle. The stars above Earth no longer seemed distant or unreachable. Children grew up looking at the night sky and dreaming not of rules, but of possibilities. Scientists studied the heavens freely, exploring planets, moons, and faraway systems without permission slips or fear of reprisal. Humanity had regained what it had lost, the ability to choose its own path, guided by knowledge, conscience, and courage, and the galaxy watched. Other worlds, inspired by Earth's example, began to rebuild with hope rather than fear. Trade, communication, and exploration slowly returned, but they were built on cooperation instead of control. The lessons of the past were remembered, and the mistakes of silence were no longer repeated. Earth's rebellion had not been about power or dominance. It had been about dignity, honesty, and standing up when it mattered most. That simple courage had changed the lives of billions across the stars, proving that one voice, even from a single planet, can resonate across galaxies. And so, as night fell over a healed Earth, the stars shone not as distant guardians or symbols of authority, but as reachable beacons of hope. Humanity had survived, had learned, and had taught the galaxy an enduring truth. Freedom is precious. Unity is powerful, and courage can shape history. In quiet homes, in classrooms, and in memorials, one lesson remained clear. The future belongs to those who refuse to be silent. Earth had spoken, the Council had fallen, and the stars had finally opened their arms.